This is Old Gregg Brewing.
I'm Old Gregg.
I help my friends install equipment in their brewery that they are about to open up. And in this video, I wanted to dive into what we did and sort of show you some images and videos of the brewery and how we attacked it. So a little preface here, Old Gregg Brewing is a brewery that my friends Matt and Kirby are opening up in Pflugerville, Texas. They are actually the people that own the consulting company, Solon Consulting, that I do consulting work with. So if anybody is interested in hiring us for some brewery consulting work, whether you're starting a brewery or you're looking to improve systems or get new equipment and stuff, hit us up at this email address that I can't think of off the top of my head right now. Outside of that, they are also opening up a brewery in Pflugerville called Old Gregg Brewing, and they have a lot of experience in the industry. So I thought it'd be a really great opportunity to help them install their equipment and learn a little bit while I was doing it. Matt and Kirby have been in the beer industry for a long time. They are opening a brewery after many years of being in the industry because, well, it's kind of a rite of passage. They've been wanting to open a brewery for a long time, and they settled on this brew pub model. That I'll dive into in a little bit, but just a general outline. Matt and Kirby are on the beer side of the operations, and then they partnered with a food and beverage group here in the Austin area that will handle kind of front of house stuff. They've kind of cobbled together all this random equipment and made a really cool brewery system that I want to showcase. So let's dive into kind of the systems and the install stuff that we did in the last couple of months and give you a better idea of what goes into installing a brewery from the ground up. All right, I'm here at Old Gregg Brewing in lovely Pflugerville. We're gonna go in here and check it out and kind of see what it looks like to have a brewery build out in progress. There's a lot of stuff going on, obviously a lot of equipment and stuff, and yeah, just kind of show you what they've built out so far. Got these nice little kind of louvered doors that kind of slide open, and I think that's what you call them. And it's kind of an open space in here. Lots of room. Not any tables or fixtures yet that have been installed. This is Matt. He's paid by the hour over here. But yeah, we're just gonna walk you through the brewing section of this. You can see behind me tanks and stuff, but all kinds of stuff everywhere. Parts, tools, equipment, and so back here we've got a bunch of tanks. Yeah, more tanks that are currently not hooked up, but they're all staged in place, so that's where they will ultimately be for fermentation and stuff. And then you got these cute little Mueller serving vessels that go back like 12 feet. So these things are super cool. They're actually similar to like tank pubs in the Czech Republic where they get filled with beer, bulk beer fills, these guys, but they are also lined with these like plastic bags, so you don't have to clean the tanks, they just fill up, and then you use oxygen to pressurize the bag and push it out through the draft line. So that's pretty sweet. And then they've got this brew house that is still kind of getting put together and staged up. We'll go up here on the brew deck, but it is pieced together from a couple of different brew houses. This used to be the, I think, test equipment for Thirsty Planet here in Austin. They're a famous old school brewery that actually closed earlier this year, but they got this the hot side from them, as well as a couple of these 10-barrel tanks. And yeah, I got a cold room over here, lots of fans going on, more parts, boxes, and got this outside area, got this grist case, and that's pretty much the whole property right now. So yeah, we can go in and kind of talk about the setup and what to expect from Old Gregg Brewing. And if you don't know who Old Gregg is, then you are not playing life right, because Old Gregg is classic, mighty boosh. Check it out.
Hi guys, I am Matt Couch. I am one of the owners of Old Gregg Brewing Company.
I'm Kirby O'Connell. I'm also one of the brewers at Old Gregg.
So what you're looking at is our Frankenstein system, we call it, which is, we went out and acquired a bunch of used equipment from the various sources, and what we're doing now is installing it. So we have a 10-barrel brewing system that we're actually using multiple different volumes of tanks to do some cool and interesting things like multi-batches, kreuzening, all that kind of stuff. So what you'll see is a bunch of different volumes that we can run different amounts of batches into. We have 10 barrels, 15 barrels, 30 barrels, 124, a couple bright tanks, some for conditioning, some for finishing. But the whole layout is to be able to do a lot of batches quickly and do multiple batches within 24 hours. So speed, efficiency, and quality all wrapped up into one.
And then what stage is this at right now?
So right now we have everything as far as the equipment in, everything's leveled, everything's in its final placement. We are currently working on the glycol lines, which we're running in George Fisher carrier pipe. You can see it up top there, that beautiful black pipe up there. Polyethylene fusion welded, which we're actually doing ourselves. We're trained GF installers. We're getting that hung, getting that all in line with the tanks, running all of that drop piping to go to each vessel at this point. From there, then we'll have to actually do the install of the chiller, tie that in. From that point, we're going to be working on our heating system for the brewing system after that. We have a welder coming on Friday to do all that work. Work on malt conveyance next week. We have a low voltage control system for all the cellar controls that we're installing next week, and the brewhouse panel next week as well. So we've got a lot going on. All of this is in build out, a lot of mess, but it'll be cleaned up real quick like.
Yeah, and the temperature control system is all custom that we've developed. So as we go through, I guess we'll show some of that.
Yeah.
In future ones.
Coming soon.
So he's wearing the mic, so I'm close over here. But yeah, so I'm just helping out, getting some stuff installed. But right now we're working on getting these tanks plumbed with some glycol and PEX tubing. So
Don't let him sell himself short. He's a key integral part of this whole thing.
integral. I am old Gregg. So, yeah. So this is an example of the piping coming from the bottom of the tank. These are access points for the glycol to run through, and so we're just cutting measurements of PEX pipe and getting it kind of dry fit in there without clamping or crimping things yet. And then once the backs of these tanks are all are plumbed up, we can run the lines up there. And the same thing is true for these serving tanks. Will all be glycol jacketed and chilled as well, so they are going to be connected on the backside via a header, a glycol header that will run through over here and penetrate through that ceiling and connect all of these tanks with the glycol so that they can stay cold. And then the fun part, all the beer runs out of the bottom of these tanks from these ports at the bottom through hoses. This is a beer trunk line where those are beer lines and they're insulated, and there's little glycol lines in there that will be pumping cold glycol through there to keep all those lines nice and cold. And this runs in that pipe underground, and it pops up behind that wall and feeds this draft tower where all of the taps will come. And then they also have other taps over here that'll be fed via the same type of trunk line from the kegs that are in the cold room just behind that wall. Yeah, so that's about it. So there are a couple of interesting things about this system that I wanted to talk about on camera as opposed to just doing a voiceover, because I didn't really get a lot of good audio diving into these systems. But this build out is very unique. First of all, when I got there to help do installation, obviously the floors were poured, there was a drain, all the equipment was delivered and set in place. The glycol headers had already been run and they had already set those. So a lot of the big moving parts work was already done when I got there. So a lot of tedious stuff was still left undone, and that was the stuff that really drags on and takes a while. Moving equipment is hard and heavy and all that stuff, but it's pretty cut and dry. You just put the equipment in the building. It takes a day or so, but you just get the equipment in there and that's pretty much it. So when I arrived, we needed to connect those glycol headers to the tanks by cutting specific lengths of the PEX piping and then crimping those with a pro press, or basically a tool that squeezes those connections to make them watertight. That took probably a full week of me working on that with another helper that was there. And then I ended up doing all of these connections for the sensors and basically bundling all of the connectors and the control modules together to read the temperatures on these tanks. So there's some video of the control module here, as well as some of the sensors, and I wanted to describe why this was such a unique part of this build out. So Matt and Kirby have been consulting for about 4 years with their company, and they have a lot of projects under their belt. They've seen a lot of different things, some big projects, some small projects, but they have a very efficiency, automation, engineering focused approach to building out breweries. And so with this brewery, they wanted to implement some systems that were a little bit more unique, and they could showcase some of these cool tools and pieces of equipment that you don't normally see in a brew pub setting. So these sensors and this control module, as I'll call it, is from a company called IFM. And IFM, I don't really know much about the company, but these specific sensors and probes and connectors and stuff are really, really cool. They are watertight connections. They have these control modules that plug, control up to 8 different things. They're all programmable. You can run them all to the same control panel. They can take temperature readings. They can send power to things to control things, turn them on and off. And they're very, very versatile. So they're really cool in like a larger production brewery setting. And I was in charge of like just hooking all these things up. So basically what this system allows them to do is to monitor temperatures. So you can monitor the temperature of a tank with the temperature probe, but you can also run solenoid valves or what other actuated valve through that controller for that specific tank and turn it on and off. When this isn't something that's like unique, this happens in all breweries, but it is really cool that it's all in one contained system that is waterproof. It looks cool, and it allows you to then program it to do other things in the future as well. You can log data, track it. Honestly, I don't really know the extent of what this system can do, but it does have a lot of capabilities, and they are super stoked on it. So what I did was run these wires, these connectors throughout the brewery. So they have about 20 tanks. I think they have 19 tanks that they needed to put temperature probes in. And so each one of those needed their own line from a main controller all the way to the tank. So I would connect it there, bundle lines, run it and drop them to the tanks and make sure that the lengths of wire were correct. And then the modules that like the main control modules or I don't even know what you call them. Basically the like main thing with the blinky lights, there were like 6 of those. So I had to stagger those to kind of like place them in between the tanks that they were controlling, and ultimately ran them all together back to the main controller, which is the cellar temperature controller. And you can see the functionality of that on this B-roll. It's pretty cool, touchscreen, really neat. So that's one of the systems that I think was really cool, outside of it being just like a cool Frankenstein system with some old tanks from like, an old JV Northwest system from an old brew pub. It's cool seeing these old tanks all cobbled together and working. But the other main system that I wanted to highlight and go in depth on was the fluid heater. The fluid heating, what do they call it? Is the thermal fluid heater. So this is one that is not common, and this is a very unique aspect to this build. I don't know any other brewery that utilizes this technology. It's not proprietary. It's not like something that hasn't been done before. It's just something that is not commonly done. So what do I mean when I say thermal fluid heater? This is basically it's like the same components of a water boiler. So in most larger breweries, you use steam. So you have a boiler that boils the water into steam, produces steam, and then pumps it through pipes that then pump through jackets on the tank, similar to how glycol flows through jackets on the tank, and it transfers the heat from the steam to the liquid in the kettle or the hot liquor tank. And that's how you power your brewery. Unfortunately, with steam, there comes a lot of upfront costs. Steam generators are expensive, and more specifically, the plumbing is very expensive. Boilers are pretty finicky. They take a lot of maintenance. They can be very expensive, and you need professionals to work on them. But the benefit is, over the long run, they're much cheaper. They're way more efficient, and they're just workhorses. They're great. The opposite of that is like a direct fire system. So you just put a burner underneath your tank. That's like the cheapest option to get heat into a brewery. And it's a really, really great option, but there are some caveats with direct fire. Direct fire is less efficient, costs more over time, all this stuff. So Matt and Kirby wanted to implement a thermal fluid heater as the solution. Basically, instead of having steam pumped through jackets on tanks, they're heating up an oil, a food grade oil, to hot temperatures that then pumps through those jackets, transfers heat to the liquid, specifically wort in this situation. And that is kind of like the same theory, same process as how steam is generated, but it's not steam, it's just oil. So the components are, there's a reservoir that holds the excess oil outside of the oil that's in all of the pipes in the jackets, because you need to purge all of that so there's no air in the system. That runs through a heat exchanger in this big burner unit where a large direct fire flame is heating up. So there's a recirculation pump that recircs the oil from that reservoir through the heat exchanger and back into the reservoir and just kind of keeps the whole system at a certain temperature. This burner is really, really hot and heats it up really effectively, so that's super cool. Then you have valves that will open up and allow the hot oil to go into the tanks to heat them. And you have temperature probes that control the on-off switch for these tanks. And so it works, like I said, just like a steam system, except the medium is not water vapor, it is oil. Having said all that, this was the most challenging aspect of the build out. Once things kind of got set into place, the glycol runs were made, all the connections were solid, we had tanks cooling down, we were getting geared up to actually brew beer, or they were getting geared up to brew beer. And turning on the heater was like this big monumental moment where we turned it on and watched it heat up real quickly, but it was not transferring heat effectively. And this was like an entire week-long process of just troubleshooting and trying to figure out what was going on. Luckily, we were, trying to figure out where the inefficiency was in the system, and we ended up doing a couple of things. One, we made sure that our flow rate was positive, moving the correct direction through the tanks, which it wasn't at first, so that helped with heat transfer, obviously. Two, we made sure that the reservoir was completely filled, so you had this nice buffer of heat capacity in the oil so that it didn't lose temperature rapidly whenever you open one of the jackets. Then we needed to make sure that the burner was running at optimal BTUs per hour. And this was the trickiest part of the entire thing because the burner had a damper that you could control the amount of oxygen that was being taken in, because that's how a combustion burner works, is like the more oxygen, the hotter it burns until there's too much oxygen and it's running too lean and then it can't produce a flame. So we were kind of teetering on this edge of too lean, it would kick off and take 10 minutes to turn back on, or it was running too rich or just not efficient enough to where it wasn't putting out enough BTUs to heat the oil effectively, to then heat the kettle and the hot liquor tank effectively. And again, this took about an entire week, but after that time of really troubleshooting, and they ended up doing a test brew that took a long time and kind of still dialing things in, they got it up and running, and it is now running super efficiently. The oil is transferring heat to product really well. They are able to maintain that burner temperature consistently at, I think they're holding it at 240 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is this is above, the boiling temperature of water. Obviously, oil don't boil at that temperature, so it works out. Having said all that, it was just a lot of kind of headache trying to get it up and running, but congrats to Matt and Kirby on this, because this ended up being a really cool addition to the brewery. And overall, this whole brewery is kind of one of the most unique brewing systems I've ever seen built out, especially in a brew pub setting. And outside of all of that, this is kind of a long, ranty overview of things, but outside of all of that, the model that they are building with the brewery, the brewery itself is kind of the thing that I, know the most about and kind of talk about on this channel a lot. But their business model, I think, is very appropriate for the time that we are in the beer industry. So they have gone for basically a bar. They're opening a bar with a pretty reputable food and beverage company group here in Austin, and they are going to have cocktails, they're going to have margaritas, slushies, all kinds of stuff, and they're going to have beer. So it's kind of what the new wave of breweries is going to look like. You're going to see less and less emphasis on breweries opening up for distribution, and less emphasis on hey, here's the tap room and all we sell is beer. So they're doing it right in that regard. But anyways, this is a really cool project that I spent many weeks on. This is the longest I've spent at a build out at a brewery, so I had a really good time. Learned a lot. Thanks again to Matt and Kirby for allowing me to come learn and install some stuff. So let's get back to the video. All right, I am here at Old Gregg, and we are brewing. Despite our best efforts, we are going to make beer on this system.
I'm ready. All right, up the ring.
Got the grist case up there. Gonna open that valve. Grist hydration. All right, they are mashing into the mash tun slash mash mixer. This is a big, basically mash kettle that stirs up all the mash, and then it's transferred to another vessel where it's separated. So different than a traditional single infusion system in a traditional craft brewery. And in goes the rice. All mashed in. So things are still coming together out here, but all the tanks are all hooked up and plumbed in with glycol. They're working great. Glycol is up and running. One of the compressors kind of had an issue, so they ordered an extra compressor for that, but got it kind of tuned up. The cellar though, looking good. Tanks are pretty much cleaned. I don't know if you can see that, but tanks are clean. FOH is cleaned up quite a bit now. It was a mess in here with all the parts and everything kind of all over the place, but it's looking good. Still got a few boxes and parts and stuff to send back, but they've got all their furniture over there. Got a little fence built up around the property now. Got the swamp where old Gregg lives. More furniture, patio furniture. So yeah, so far so good. They brewed one batch into a tank already on Saturday. I couldn't make it for that, but said the brew was like 14 hours. They had some issues with the heating stuff, which I'm gonna go over. But other than that, seems like the system's working pretty good. Pretty efficient system. It's got rakes, it's got mash stirrers, it's got a giant grist case. So a lot of wort making ability as well as fermentation ability. So I look forward to seeing how the rest of this brew goes, and hopefully give you some more updates and maybe some tasting notes once the beer is ready. And this is the lauter tun where you pump the mash into and separate the wort from the mash bed itself. It's just a separate vessel to be able to do multiple batches at once. Well, we're here at old Gregg, finally having a beer after a couple of months of doing install work and just kind of waiting on things to come together. They are finally open. It is a Friday. I think it's November 22nd, but came out here, took a couple of extra shots in the brewery and wanted to grab a beer officially from the taps. Tasty stuff. This is the, I think, Boat Times German Pils. Very tasty. But yeah, so I'm just enjoying the day out here. It is very sunny. Right in my eyes. I tried to scoot back into the shade, but doesn't make as good of a shot. So for the viewing pleasure of you YouTubers out there, YouTubies, I don't know, the people that watch these videos, you're welcome. I'm suffering for your joy. But yeah, so everything's looking really nice in there. I don't know if you can see, but they've got a food truck set up outside. They've got umbrellas, bar seating, high tops, all kinds of stuff. They're putting in some new grass over here, hangout area. They've got some Adirondack chairs. And then they've got the road coming by. So it's looking really great. They did an awesome job, but they're just now starting to blast it out that they're open. Hopefully they'll get some people in here today. It is a Friday, the first kind of weekend, going into the first weekend of their business. So hopefully it's pretty busy for them. But yeah, everything's looking good and the beers are tasting great. And hopefully this was an informative video on the install and how the system works. So that's all I got. Cheers.